All right, everyone. Like I said, I've already given you a little bit of insight to this wonderful human that we have the privilege of hearing from today. But I just want to officially welcome you onto the podcast, Bevin.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Oh, well, thank you very much. When I first, started hearing the tidbits of your story, it really got me. And I know that there's so many layers to it, right? There's
Yeah.
so many layers to what you have built into you already, what you've had to build along the way, becoming a single parent, going through the infertility journey, raising these kiddos on your own. So I don't want to put any words in your mouth or anything. I want all of our listeners to just hear your story from you. And, um, you know, without it being 5 hours long, which I know you could totally fill, what are some, because I would be riveted the entire 5 hours. I would love to just know, what is your story and kind of where are you coming from to be where you are right now?
Yeah. Well, and we'll just have like 4 follow-ups to this. That'll be our 5 hours.
Okay, sounds good.
In 2019, my husband, Mark, gave me 4 bottles of Bordeaux wine and a card written in French for Mother's Day, which was very strange because he had never studied French. So he was telling me that he had booked this whirlwind trip to Bordeaux for my 40th birthday, which was about 6 months later. And I got even more excited when he said, and we're leaving the kids home. I was like, oh my gosh, because we had that time had a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. I had just had our son. And so we started to plan. And then 2 weeks later, I got laid off from a job that I absolutely loved. And we were very much a 2-income family. So this was completely flipped us upside down. I'd just taken maternity leave. And a couple of weeks after that, I told Mark I didn't want to look for another job, which, went really well. I told him, I said, I'm tired of putting our financial health in the hands of any one person. It's the 3rd time I'd been laid off. We had big things that we had done. We had gone through IVF several times to have our 2 kiddos. We wanted to plan. And I said, I don't want to put that in one person anymore. So I started my own business. And at that time, I took what I had done for over almost 10 years for bigger companies doing their brand strategy and launch execution, and I was doing it for smaller companies. And I said to Mark, let's do this as a proof of concept. Let's see if I can make $5,000 by the end of August. And if so, I'll keep going. And so I did. I made like $0, $1,000, $5,000, and then jumped up to $10,000 a month pretty quickly. But still, this trip seemed totally crazy, right? Like, I was like, should we really do this? We're going to be in planes the same amount of time we're on the ground. And so even the day before we left, I was like, should we just cancel? But we didn't. We went, we had an amazing time, celebrated my birthday in this beautiful city, delicious wine, amazing food, just being together the way we were before we had kids, before we got married, like just really returning to that core team of who we were. And we came back home and it was the week of Thanksgiving. So Mark had taken the whole week off work. We did stuff around the house. We got the house ready for Thanksgiving, which has always been my favorite holiday. We took my daughter to her first movie theater show, had Thanksgiving, and it was pre-COVID. So we had like 25 people there. And then the day after Thanksgiving, I went upstairs to wake up Mark, and he was ice cold and I couldn't wake him up. And he had passed away in the middle of the night, completely unexpectedly. We had no idea that one of his arteries was 95% blocked and the other was 50% blocked. And all of a sudden, my whole life was upside down, backwards, twisted around. And I am now a solo parent of 2 children under the age of 3 at the time, an entrepreneur with a very fledgling business as the sole provider of my family. And I'm doing it without my best friend and the love of my life by my side, who had always been my biggest cheerleader. And so it was a whole new reality. And about a month later, I posted about it, and on Facebook, just saying like, this happened and we had just been on this trip. And I ended that post by saying something along the lines of, I'm so glad we had been on this adventure together. And whenever you're faced with a choice, just take the damn trip.
Yeah.
And that resonated with so many people. And they reached out to me and said, I took this trip with my family or went with my dad, or I took this risk, because it's not about trips. It's about taking a chance, like taking the chance on yourself, on your big, bold, crazy dream, I call it. And so that really, I looked back at the hardest things I'd been through, not just losing Mark, but the IVF journey, miscarriage, losing my dad to cancer when I was 24, losing my home in a house fire. And I had to ask myself, what was it that I do differently? Not better, but differently than other people to navigate these situations, and then also create amazing things like taking my business to 6 figures, having these kiddos. And that is where the D.A.M.N framework came from. And so I will say the word damn a lot, but it means something. It's for like mindset shifts that when I looked at what I did differently, those were what carried me through. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. So now I use them to create things in my life. And so let me tell you the D.A.M.N framework, and then I'll tell you what I most recently created.
I was like, a drum roll.
Yeah. So it stands for decide and declare, attend your own party, moments, not minutes, and now is the time. And so now I use it to create things. And so in 2020, I thought, so what most people didn't know is that when Mark passed away, we were about 60 days away from doing our next round of IVF. And so in 2020, I went through those whole things. I decided what was the most important thing to me, and I declared that, and I stayed present, and I chose moments, not minutes. And I knew that now is the time. And I decided to move forward with that IVF as a solo parent with the embryos that Mark and I had frozen before he passed away. So now I am a solo parent of a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 7-month-old.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Praise you. Praise you. Wow. So, okay. So that is just a lot to take in right there. And just peeling apart some of these layers. I mean, I've been down the infertility road. My mom was a single parent because my dad passed away when I was 1, after it was an accident, a car accident. And, we actually, my husband went through 2 years of heart issues and then had to have heart surgery, and we didn't know if he'd make it. And so much of your story, and Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday. I'm like, okay, so we're best friends in the making. So that sounds good. And so just so much of that story. And I want to ask you, because I find this really fascinating in people's stories that have, overcome so much. And I think because I have been through so many different trials in my life, and you've been through so many trials in your life, it's almost shocking sometimes to meet some adults that are like, oh, I've never lost anyone close to me. Nothing has ever happened to me. I was like, that still exists when you're 40. I'm 43, I think. And
it's true, because Mark had never really lost anybody close to him, and he was 40.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd lost some grandparents when he was younger, but he'd never experienced that in his understanding years, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it does exist, but yeah, it's strange.
It is strange, but the fact is it usually always comes, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And so I want to ask you, so what characteristics do you think that you already possessed coming into this season of all of this massive pivoting in your life, from IVF to losing Mark and then doing IVF on your own, all of that? What are some characteristics that you brought in, and what are some that you had to build along the way because you were like, oh, I see a gap here, I need to go in and fill that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And one thing I'll say though, when we were talking about people who hadn't been through such traumatic loss, because I had that when I had my house fire and I was staying with a friend, and she woke up one morning and she was really cranky, and I said, what's wrong? She's like, it's nothing compared to your problems. And I said, but that doesn't matter. And I think it's David Kessler that says something along the lines of the hardest loss is always your loss.
Right.
So sometimes people hear my story and they're like, whoa, like nothing compare, like I should not complain. And I'm like, but it doesn't matter because you don't live my life every day.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you lose something, you know, you lose a job, you don't get a promotion, you have a breakup, like those are still things to grieve.
Right.
And they're valid. And so that has been something that I try really hard, because it wasn't like I lost Mark and I popped up and I was like, how do I create a movement out of this? It was like,
right.
you know, there's still days that I grieve hard. And so, yeah, I just always like to draw that distinction, but I think that
can I just pause real quick? And
sure.
because I think that's such a good point that you bring up. And there's something, I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown. I like follow her a lot. Of course you are. So anyway, I was reading, I got her book literally like right here. Boop, you know,
yeah, I was listening to it right before we jumped up. We are best friends.
Yeah,
I was just listening to it as I drove home. So
did it come out? I signed up for Audible when it was going to, but it hadn't come out yet. And I already had the book. So I'm like doing it the old fashioned way with my eyeballs. So, anyway, but in there, she's talking about, and I've experienced this too, where you go through an experience and you are like, oh, that was really hard. And you're trying to give yourself room to process that. But then you hear someone that is quote unquote worse. And you're like, oh, I don't have a right to do that. And it makes the healing process so much longer for yourself, because you keep cracking and trying to heal these little inconsistencies instead of really diving into it and healing what you've been through. So anyway, I just wanted to pause in there and say there is real truth behind that, of owning your own path that you're going on and owning your own, whatever it is, it's guilt, it's shame, it's victimhood from something, whatever that is, instead of just comparing everyone's hard. Right.
Yeah. So. And that is the A of the D.A.M.N framework, 100%, which is the attend your own party. And these are things like I knew and I've deepened along the way, but so the attend your own party is like, you probably heard if you've ever taken yoga, it's like stay on your own mat. And that's that we can always make ourselves feel better or worse, depending on which way we look, right? Like if I want to make myself feel better, this is going to sound terrible. I never do this, but if I want to make myself feel better about the fertility journey, I look at people who have not been able to successfully conceive. Like I feel awful for them. And like, I have so much compassion and my heart goes out to them. But then I feel like, oh, how lucky I am that I've been able to do this. And if I want to make myself feel worse, then I look at people who didn't have to go through that, who just conceived naturally without like any struggle. But none of that is useful. And so when we stay on our own mat and we compare ourselves to where we've been and where we want to go, it's just so much more powerful.
Right.
And it's also the other part of it is that we are creating our experience of our lives through our thoughts. And so we can change our experience by just questioning whether there's another way to think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I call it taking 100% radically loving responsibility for our role in the experience of our lives. So this is something that I've definitely developed along the way. Like I said, I think I had a sneak peek of it, but now that is that I am responsible for how I show up, but not how things end up. And when you're a solo parent, there is a lot of opportunity for you to feel guilty about what you can and can't do. And so we feel, and this is everybody, but like just in particular, I think solo parents deal with this a lot, where you feel like, oh, well, I should volunteer here, or that person wants me to do this, so I should do it. And we know like we don't really have the capacity, but we feel guilty saying no. But what we have to remember is we can say no with a lot of love and a lot of compassion, and we can set our boundaries with a lot of love and a lot of compassion, and we can show up and be responsible for how we show up and let go of the responsibility of how it ends up. Let go of the responsibility of how other people feel about our actions.
Absolutely.
That's outside of our responsibility.
I deal with this so much with, I when I'm doing my coaching, I specifically mostly work with parents of teen young women. So that 9 to 18, because 9 is a preteen now. I'm like, oh,
Oof,
I
yeah.
know, right? Oh, but and my own daughters are 12, 14, 14, and 16. And so, but I deal with this a lot because parents either are like, I don't want to be responsible at all for the way that it ends up. So I am just going to
Yeah.
back away now when they are, 12, 13 years old and see what happens.
Yeah.
Or they go all in and they are helicopter parents or, lawnmower parents, all these things, all these new terms that they have today. And
Yeah.
they're like, I am controlling everything because I am in charge of how it ends up. And so
Right.
what you're saying is exactly what I try to help parents do. Just show up, have the conversations, right? You
Yeah.
are not going to be responsible for what happens, to them
Yeah.
and what decisions they make, but you are responsible for showing up and doing your part
Yeah.
in that. So, wow.
100%. Yeah. And I think that ability to be present, and this is sort of the moments, not minutes part, where we focus on the moments that aren't replicable and we focus on the moments that are so important and powerful. That's another thing that I have absolutely learned. And I see, I have this all the time show up because my daughter, who is 5, remembers her dad and remembers
Mm-hmm.
losing him. She was there that morning. She was the one like begging me to stop screaming with her hands over her ears because she was like, I don't understand what's happening. And so it comes up a lot for her of like, I just miss daddy. I'm just sad because I miss daddy today.
Yeah.
And I we talk about it. And I tell her, I'm like, it's okay to be sad. I'm a firm believer that there is no such thing as a bad emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were talking about before, like with making things stick around longer, the longer and harder we fight our emotions, the more they stick around. I call them emotional riptides. That's the way
Mm-hmm.
we grow, is when we fight against it. So, but recently what's been really interesting for Guinevere is I joke. I'm like, I feel like when she does something that she perceives as wrong, like she might get in trouble, she's like, but I'm just sad about daddy. Because she knows it's allowed. Like she knows she's allowed to be sad. We always talk about that. And like, I feel like she thinks it's like her get out of jail free card. And so I've had to say to her recently, I'm like, it's okay to be sad. And it's also okay to be happy. And she knows that, but just reminding her that there are no good or bad emotions. We just bring our own judgment to them. So in any situation, we can hold more than one emotion, and it's okay to feel whatever we're feeling. So that's something that as a parent, all I want is to take that heartbreak away from her.
Right.
I mean, I want Mark back so badly. And more than that, I want Mark back because I don't want my daughter to have gone through that. And my son too, but he was so young, right? He was only 10 months old. So that's something I think as parents, when we talk about showing up, is being willing to like show up and sit
Mm.
and not fix
Yes.
and not manipulate situations to make, I mean, I'm not saying don't make it easier for your kids, but like, not, my sister was dealing with my niece is 16, like a situation with my niece's friends. And like, don't get involved. Just, you gotta sit, you gotta support her, be there when she needs you, but don't try to don't dive into that one. Like,
Yeah.
and it's
Just
hard.
help her, help, her daughter, talk through her feelings and decisions and actions and all of that. Absolutely. Because I mean, I see this so often as our kids are graduating and leaving home, and then they don't know how to problem solve on their own at all because they have had their parent there doing it for them this whole time. And so I definitely see it. And equipping them with the ability to problem solve is one of the best things that you can do as a parent. So,
Yeah.
goodness, that is awesome stuff right there. So I just want to say, as a kid that grew up with a dad that passed away super young, and my dad was he was in a coma for 9 months before he passed away. So it was this big traumatic event, but I was 1, right? But my mom had to walk through that, and then she had to take him off of life support, and it was dark and terrible. But I love that you're talking to her about him,
Yeah.
to like, just keep talking to her about him.
Oh, we have
And
pictures of him
oh,
everywhere.
that's amazing.
And when I had Maristella, and I said to Guinevere, I said, you have such an important job. And she said,
Mm,
what is it? I said, we have to share the stories about daddy,
yeah.
because Jonathan doesn't really remember him and Maristella will have never met him. So it is our job to tell those stories. And I think she likes that. And I think,
Yeah.
it's hard. Like, I've said this to a lot of people recently, because it's a gut punch when we're having a great day and then all of a sudden we get her in the car seat and she starts crying. I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, I just, this is so heartbreaking. She said, do you think that the police officers are going to bring daddy back now, or have they just forgotten about him?
Mm,
And I'm like, okay, I have to go through this again and say, daddy died. And
mm,
and that's, my mom was with me and she's like, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with that over and over again. And I was like, I just never know when it's going to come sometimes.
mm.
So that being prepared, not, not, um, so like, because sometimes people will say, how do you prepare for these tragedies, right? Like, how do I prepare for like when my daughter's going to get upset, or how do I prepare? And I say, you don't.
Right. I was just going to say, yeah.
I don't think you catastrophize that way, because there's no way I would have sat and thought, well, what if my husband dies at 40?
Right.
Like, I would never would have thought of that. So, and that's living up in our thoughts and our anxiety. It's not fear. Fear is something you can take action on. It's anxiety. And instead, we just have to stay present in the moment, that like, now is the time, staying grounded, and know that we have gotten through every hard thing that we've ever faced. So what makes us think that there's going to be something that we can't get through in the future?
Mm, that's such a great mindset to have. Um, so with that, and so how old was your oldest daughter when he passed?
Just 2.5,
Two and a half.
just about 3. Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things that I go through with my parenting clients is talking about the inevitable impacts of parenting. And I say all the time, these are impacts that are going to happen in these first 18 years, whether you want them to or not, whether you're there for them or not, whether you're like the, A+ parent of them or not, right? They're
Yeah.
going to be impacts that your kids carry with you. And one of those big things is if they are there or not. So I can say that my dad was one of the biggest hands down impacts of my entire childhood, but he passed away when I was 1, right?
Yeah.
And so having that and being able to be, open and honest about that, I think is so important for her. I feel for your daughter and everything but not just sadness, there's that, but also just so empowering. Like my dad has been one of the most empowering figures of my entire life. And even when I went into college and thereafter, and even today, he's so empowering to me, even though he's not right here physically with me. So, so I feel for her, but I also am just like fist bumping her, like,
And she's gonna take over the world. Like, somebody said to me something about being a big deal the other day. I was like, why don't you talk to my daughter who's 5? Because she is the biggest deal. Like, I don't know what else to do, but she's gonna be amazing. Because
just gonna follow the parade, right?
yeah, she is. She's been like, oh, the parade's over there, I'm taking a left, it's gonna follow me. Like, she's hilarious. So yeah. And I think, what's so interesting about what you said about the impact of parenting, because when I talk about the D.A.M.N framework and people think that we just use it for big, bold things,
Mm,
oh my gosh, I use it every day, sometimes every minute, because there are times I have 3 children under the 5 and under. There's a lot of them. There's only one of me. They don't like to sleep. So, all the things. And there are times where I find myself yelling or like not being the parent I really want to be. And so I go through that framework. I stop and I get present and like just get grounded back in the moment, which usually is like getting grounded back in our body. So I like rub my hands and like touch my like body, because your body can only ever be in the present moment. Your thoughts can be all over the place, but So I get grounded and then I decide and declare like, what kind of parent do I want to be right now?
Mm,
And but I forgive like, I don't sit here and dwell in you never should have yelled. And you just like, I'm like, okay, whew, like just pause, like acknowledge what's going on and then do something different. And that's something that I think as parents, we can take one moment, 1 millisecond where we did something we're not proud of, or we snapped at my son wants to crawl in his car seat by himself. And I'm like, just get in there. Like, and I can be so like frustrated with myself and I can dwell on that and think, oh my God, I am the worst mom. Or I can be like, whoo, I am a human. And, I also made my son pancakes today. So like, let's figure out where I'm going to focus. So as parents, we just have the opportunity to beat the crap out of ourselves
mm.
mentally so much. And I just encourage and invite everyone listening to put the baseball bat down and just know, like, we all know you're doing your best.
Right. Right. Exactly. I know it's so easy, especially when you're working toward the latter years, to be like, well, I screwed up for 10, 12 years. I'm like, well, pivot right now, just show up, say, you know what? I realize I didn't do my best there, or that might have hurt you, but we're making a pivot and I'm here for you. You can
Yeah.
always just make the pivot, make the change, and beautiful things can happen from that. And,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if your kid, if it turns 18 next week, guess what? We still have time. We still have
Yeah.
time. So,
Yeah.
and even afterwards, of
Right.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we
I
always,
always say,
yeah.
I work with 9 to 18 because that really is, before they get that quote unquote adult title. And I was like, but you don't stop parenting at, 18 by any means, it's not like
Just
you're,
ask my mom and how she's parenting her 4 children, and I'm the youngest. So she's still parents.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it has been a joy to have you on here today. And I tell you, you have definitely impacted me. I wrote down the D.A.M.N framework for myself and just using that. And, we're going through just some things with just a lot of balls in the air right now. And I'm just going to be
Yeah.
like, you know what? Damn, I'm going to, I'm going to do the damn
Yes.
framework.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I call the damn barometer. So it's like when you get this full body damn either way, where you're like, damn, yes, like go towards that. And if you're like, damn, no, then go away from that. So it's like, but you can just be like, damn, okay. Like, and it's a good, like, place to pause. And one last thing I'll say about when you were talking about the parents who, like, your kids are turning 18, this is the moments, not minutes, right?
Mhm.
Like, it is not about the minutes. It is
Yes,
not about the minutes of how many years we've lived. It truly is about the moments. And those are the things that your children will remember, that you will remember. And we just want more damn positive moments than bad. And you can always create more of those. So I love.
definitely. Well, like even when you think back in your memories, does anyone think of an entire 24-hour span when they're like, that was such a good day? This is what I did at 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And, I was like, no, you think of like 10 seconds, maybe you think of
Right.
maybe an hour at the most, whatever that is, but it's these moments, not minutes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me and our audience where we can find you and just get in your parade.
Well, you can find me at bevinfarrand.com. And from there, you can really join everything. So there's a Take the Damn Chance community that you can be a part of. You can find me on Instagram. I have a really good 5-day training that you can get on bevinfarrand.com. It's free. You just sign up for it. And it's called Uncover and Ignite Your Big, Bold, Crazy Dream. And
Mm,
it's just a really great way to kind of get more clarity on what I call your yes,
mm.
so that you know what you really want to create in life.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. And okay, so thank you so much for being on here and sharing your wisdom and your fireworks and your story. Your story is really powerful, and everyone's story is really powerful. So I'm glad that we were able to illuminate on that some. So Thank you so much. And for all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the 6570 Family Project podcast. And we will be back with you next week with another episode.